This is the CCW Digital Speaker Spotlight Series. I'm Brian Cantor, Principal Analyst for CCW Digital, and your host for today's discussion. For today's topic, let's focus on eliminating tunnel vision from the customer contact and customer experience process. We often get so fixated on certain objectives. Let's go omni-channel, let's reduce effort, let's build a journey map, that we forget to focus on the big picture potential and the lasting ramifications of those endeavors. We don't look beyond these very specific goals, and while that might be great in the short term, it ultimately puts a long-term ceiling on the impact of our efforts. We also have to stop fixating on certain functions. The customer service or customer experience team shouldn't just focus on the customer experience, but also the factors like marketing and the user experience journey. We really need to think about how everything comes together. Even if a particular interaction doesn't need you to draw on every corner of the business, knowing how the journey's coming together, knowing how things intersect, will certainly inform the context, your ability to act, your ability to adapt, and your ability to deliver the best possible customer experience and the best results possible. Now, this holistic, big picture mindset will be central to CCW Nashville, and it's also a big part of the objectives and the achievements for Heidi Munc of Nationwide. She's going to be speaking at Nashville this January, and she's actually here with us today to share some of her insights. So Heidi, how is everything?
Everything's going great, Brian. How are you?
I am doing phenomenally, and most importantly because I'm thrilled for the insights you're going to share today. I think, again, frankly, I commented on how we have tunnel vision. This is something we sometimes do. I sometimes do as an analyst, as a content producer. I really want to tackle that one goal, that one objective, because I know everyone's talking about it. And I think that that's a mistake in the long term. You really need to think about the intersections. And it's so great to be speaking to someone who takes that big picture, design-oriented mindset within her organization.
Thank you. Yes, it's true. It's really important to take a look at the whole picture. However, it is difficult to achieve sometimes. In our situation, my user experience team, we're a service to the enterprise, but we're a highly siloed organization, and usually we're engaged by one part of the business who is really only looking very specifically at metrics within their own organization. And we can certainly work with them and partner to improve an experience in that one very narrow set of interactions, but we know that that's not truly how customers experience Nationwide. Their feelings about us and how well we're delivering on our brand promise of protecting what matters most comes over time with the culmination of all of the interactions they have with us. So we feel part of our mission in the UX department is helping business partners take a broader aperture and look more end-to-end at the problems they're trying to solve and see how their one piece of the puzzle connects to everything else, and try to bring in subsequent partners to view things more holistically and solve problems from a journey perspective instead of a touch point perspective.
Yeah, and I think that hits on an exact topic that I wanted to start with, and that's the idea of the intersection of the user experience and the customer experience. So I alluded to this in my introduction a little bit, that basically sometimes customer experience people, they focus so heavily on the engagement side of the coin that they forget that there's an entire experience associated with getting into that engagement and then what happens after the engagement. And so how do you start to measure, manage, evaluate, and really just think about that entire user experience?
Yeah, we start from where people are. So if people come to us with a very specific business problem or experience problem that they want help with, one of the first things we'll do is ask questions like, well, what was the customer doing before that point? Well, what's the customer doing after that point? What are they trying to achieve next? And that just helps the business partner think about things more holistically. So it's just one of the tools that we use to try to get people to think about solving problems that happen not just in their area, but before their area and after their area, and how they're all connected. Oftentimes, business partners will have an objective that absolutely the solution would have to be activated in another silo, and in that case, they're pretty highly incented to form a cross-functional team or a cross-business team and pull resources together to try to solve a more holistic problem. But in other cases, it takes us a little while to get our business partners there.
And I think what would certainly help with this is the idea of journey mapping and journey development. And one of the things I want to bring up, though, is when a lot of organizations focus on journey mapping, and don't get me wrong, the fact that organizations are talking about journey mapping is very important. It's certainly a step in the right direction. but I feel like they sometimes overlook that it goes beyond the map itself. So what I would argue is that actually what comes before you get at your journey map, and then also what happens after, is actually far more valuable than the map itself. So I want to start by asking you about the former process, kind of the getting it going. What does it take to really build a singular, unified view of your journey that would allow you to have insight into all the different touch points and business units and how everything comes together?
Access to customers. I mean, that is really, truly where you should be starting. If your ultimate goal is to create a service map and understand the front stage and the backstage, you can certainly start by uncovering your own processes and your own business rules and logic and map out that portion of the journey. That's really the inside view. But to get at the outside view, it's imperative that you actually talk to customers. It's so important because people within an organization view things from a very inside-out fashion. I have a great example of this. A few years ago, we were engaged by our partners in the claims department. The leader of claims wanted to understand what opportunities existed to create a better claims experience in what he called the four main phases of a claim. And he described those as, something happens to one of our customers. We call them members because we're a mutual. Something happens to one of our members. Step 2, they file a claim. Step 3, that thing is resolved. Step 4, they close the claim. And of course, when you go out and talk to customers, that's not the way they view the world. What we uncovered by talking to people who had recently had a claim with Nationwide was that they viewed that process in a series of 11 steps, and they were fraught with all different types of uncertainty and anxiety, and it really uncovered some moments that we wouldn't necessarily would have known were opportunity spaces for us if we hadn't talked to them and mapped things out from their perspective. Now, after we have that 11-point step, that 11-phase step of the customer's experience with a claim, we can go back and overlay that over our business processes, and that can help build a roadmap. Which one of these makes sense for us to tackle first, because it's either low-hanging fruit, or we can make some quick progress there and show some quantifiable business results. Which ones are going to take longer to resolve, and we know we're going to have to enlist some partners outside of the silos who want to start building relationships now and perhaps go jointly for funding to resolve it in the next year, but at least that gives you a good overview of the world that you're trying to improve.
Makes perfect sense. You start really with the idea of what does this look like to your customers? And they may, again, not think of it in terms of a traditional journey, the way a customer contact thought leader tries to pitch it, but they obviously know what they're experiencing when they're interacting with your business. So you start with that principle of understanding what it looks like to the customer, then you kind of align that with your business processes and sort of see what that means for the different stakeholders, where gaps might exist, and then you sort of are able to sort of construct a pretty good singular map of your customer experience journey. But it doesn't stop there, right? Because just having a map, just letting you know, oh, here's what the experience looks like, or even here's where things are going wrong, or here's where things are going right, that doesn't really tell you it tells you something, but it doesn't exactly lead to any value or any improvement. The real value of the journey map is that next phase where you say, okay, how can we use this to improve the customer experience or improve whatever business process you're trying to tackle to eliminate, to anticipate needs and eliminate pain points. And so I'm wondering, how you transition from, okay, we have the right map of what our experience looks like. Now, how do we actually start orchestrating and optimizing the journey to be more valuable for internal and external customers?
Yeah, we do a sort of just a 2x2 exercise with value to the member and value to the customer, and then sort of technical complexity or solution feasibility that just helps us organize the opportunities on a scale from what can we start on right now and what do we need to know more about before we can uncover things. You're absolutely right. Like a map on its own doesn't do you anything. I can have a map of Nashville sitting on my desk, but unless I get in a car and put some gas in the car and start driving, I'm not going to get to Nashville, right? So you have to have a plan that goes along with your roadmap in order to actually start tackling some of these things. We have business partners that are a little more hesitant to take on some of the more complicated, time-consuming, and costly improvements. We absolutely just get to work straight away on some of the quicker, lower-hanging fruit things so that we can start to show them the value of prioritizing your improvements and making progress across that journey. And then we acquire additional investments over time for more complicated solutions. I'd also say, I want to add that one thing that we have found to be a pretty great tool in incenting people to move sooner rather than later is simply injecting a strong voice of the customer in your artifacts. So maps are cool. They look pretty cool. People tend to like them. You know, they hang them on the wall. They look at them. They reference them. But it's not really a replacement for those true customer stories that have the ability to tug on your emotional heartstrings and really incent associates to make improvements that help benefit our customers, our members. So we'll try to find ways to whatever really insightful quote or story that we learned when we're out in the field doing qualitative research, we find ways of bringing that to life in either the journey diagram or in addendum documents where we're telling user stories, sometimes even video snippets that will get emailed out to project team members so that people absolutely have an understanding of and appreciation for the people that we're designing solutions for.
I think you hit the nail on the head there because we're constantly talking about how it can't be transactional, that the customer experience is about connections, it's about humanity, it's about that true meaningful link between a brand and its customers. And if all you're doing is sort of mapping pain points in terms of this transaction was a little tricky or this channel would be easier than another channel, that could be very valuable from an efficiency standpoint, but I feel like you're missing that human factor, which not only prevents connection with customers, but also helps to motivate your agents to really feel invested in this outcome. And I'd imagine that if you're really trying to cultivate the right kind of agents, the right kind of employees to have in front of your customers, they need to understand that human element as well.
Yes, absolutely. Totally agree.
Now, when you talk about the human side of things and you talk about additional insights, whether it's looking at a journey map, whether it's looking at just traditional voice of the customer data, is this notion of customer intent. What was the customer really trying to achieve? Why are they really interacting the way they did? And so, how do you answer those questions? How do you determine the intent as opposed to just the request? And then more importantly, what can you actually do with that knowledge?
Yeah, so coming from a user experience background instead of a customer experience background, we're highly invested in qualitative data. So as an example, we were recently doing some work for one of the customer contact centers where they were trying to find opportunities to reduce call volume. And we knew from their voice of customer logs and the data they had collected, one of the top reasons people were calling were billing reasons. And that makes perfect sense. If people have difficulty paying their bill or need to change the date of their bill, they're going to call a customer contact center to help them with that. But we wanted to understand the underlying drivers of that. So if you're calling to change the date on the bill, is that a certain segment that is doing that consistently? Are there ways that we could uncover that they wanted to do that and proactively provide them a means to do that digitally so they didn't have to call in? Before we can figure out what are the right solutions to create, we need to understand that problem space a little bit better. So we reached out to folks who had recently called the contact center to do interviews with them to better understand what drove them to call in the first place. And we specifically narrowed in on folks who, they had a pretty strong digital footprint. So with some of them, we knew that they had done research online for either the insurance or financial services product that they had purchased from Nationwide. They had researched online. Oftentimes they had purchased the product online. Many of them did not have an exclusive agent assigned to them. They were very self-sufficient and wanted to do things digitally. So then why, when there was a particular issue, did they pick up the phone and call us? So we really need to kind of dig into the intent so that we can, one, help that call center reduce their call volume, and two, help drive opportunities for when people do call the call center, what are ways that we can make that call sort of uncover what's the next reason they could potentially call for and solve that problem at the same time so that over time you're also reducing the calls in.
Yeah, I also think one of the things that certainly it's relevant in your organization, it's relevant across the board, is that we see everyone really emphasizing on reducing effort. And you can use a different term. You could call it friction. You could call it frustration, reducing hassle, whatever it is. It's really about making it easier, making it less annoying, so to speak, for the customer to get what they're looking for. And that's an ambitious goal. And frankly, if you think about your typical as a consumer, surely you've had situations where you probably had to put in more effort than you wanted. You were a little bit more frustrated than you wanted. And just if an organization made it easier, that's going to go a long way in building satisfaction and demonstrating value. But you're not stopping there. you actually, once you've started to identify some of these opportunities to eliminate pain and optimize the journey, you want to go that extra mile and you actually want to start bringing delight back into the equation. You want to make it not just an easy experience, but a valuable one. And so, how are you doing that? How are you starting to look for opportunities to add positive value back into the experience without compromising the efficiency and the ease with which you've kind of been operating and achieving recently?
Yeah, it's a great question and a topic that we discuss frequently here because we understand the importance of both sides of that experience coin. We know that effort is highly correlated to satisfaction, and satisfaction is highly correlated to retention. So we absolutely want to reduce effort where it makes sense. So there are some certain things that are just transactional. People just want to get done, and they want to get them done as easy as possible, and we want to identify which things those are and make it as frictionless as we possibly can. There are other things, and in certain cases, those other things include that sometimes people just need to talk to a human. What are things that we can do in those higher touch interactions where we can provide an unexpected way to delight them? In our category, especially on the property and casualty side, you really only deal with us when there is a problem. So there's a lot of conversation and debate about what role does delight play in those kind of moments. You can think about weather patterns and hurricanes and those type of things. Like, what does delight mean for someone when they're in a traumatic situation like that? We have to be very careful with how it's applied so that it's appropriate delight and that it is respectful of the situation that people are in. So that really means that we have to very deeply understand our customers and the emotional context in which they come to us for something, and make sure that we're being really appropriate in that space. Now, other times, it might be something as simple as, you had to get a tow truck because you had a flat tire and you had a towing service with us, and we bring you a bottle of water, right? Things that are certainly legally permissible to do and yet unexpected, small gestures that, leave a halo of a good feeling with the customer. It's sort of just orchestrating all of those different factors so that we understand the right times to create opportunities for delight. And then those, of course, are things that you really rely on your experienced design team to create, because those are the kind of instances that if you want to unexpectedly delight people, you're not asking your customers what they expect in that situation, right? You want to go above and beyond and provide the thing that they didn't expect. And certainly, try that out, A/B test it, get data back, see what's resonating most with your customers, and then you can scale that out to larger parts of your organization.
Yeah, you really captured an important distinction there, because the goal, what we're talking about, is trying to achieve and deliver delight. It's not necessarily trying to deliver extravagance. And I feel like customer contact professionals get caught up on, they've ignored the distinction between the two. They assume that when we're talking about delight, it means, your those classic stories like showing up at the airport with a steak or accepting a tire that you never sold to someone for a return. It's not always one of those magical moments, so to speak. What it is figuring out what the customer is going through, what they're feeling, what they're looking for. And if you can add a little bit more value, some positive impact, like you said, bringing the bottle of water, or just saying their name, or asking them, you knew they went to a sports game, how did it play out, whatever it may be, thinking about those little touches, as well as in some cases the big gestures that are going to deliver delight. It's going to depend on context. It's going to depend on the customer. The key here, though, is to focus on delight as an outcome, not focus on extravagance as a mechanism, if that makes sense.
That's right. That makes perfect sense.
Well, and we're going to have plenty more insights with Heidi when we go to Nashville this January. As you can see, she and her organization are really thinking about it from the standpoint of, you can make the experience more efficient, you can reduce effort, and that doesn't mean you can't still make those strong human connections. It doesn't mean you can't start to think about big picture value and benefits, and I'm sure she's going to have a lot of great insights there. But before heading to actually that deeper dive when we get to Nashville, I want to take the chance to get to know Heidi a little bit now, because again, you're not just going to be there listening to her speak or listening to her topic. You're going to get to know her, and you're going to get to know a lot of our speakers. And so, as part of our Spotlight series, we wanted to just briefly let you know who they are and some of their background and experiences. And so, my first question for you, Heidi, is, have you ever been to Nashville before?
I have. I've been to Nashville twice.
What'd you think?
Absolutely love it. I went probably 15 years ago for the first time for a girls' weekend, and it was in the summer. It wasn't too hot. It was sort of perfect weather, and we just had an amazing time. one of the things that surprised me, everybody talks about how great the music is there, but I kind of didn't believe it. I couldn't envision an experience where I could go from pub to pub to pub and have an amazing country or bluegrass group just playing in the middle of the day in that pub. So that was just absolutely fantastic. Went back again a few years ago on spring break. I had kids they were in elementary school at the time, and my son was getting really, really interested in music. So we went down to Nashville again, took the kids on spring break, limited our bar scene to about 4 p.m. About 4 p.m. we got out of the bars, but from noon to 4, it was a very family-friendly, safe environment where we got to hear a ton of great music with our kids, and we just had an absolute great time.
Yeah, can't wait to go there. But there are other great cities and great places in the world. So what's your favorite place to vacation overall?
Oh gosh, it's a hard one. I've been lucky. I've had the opportunity to do a lot of travel, and I would say I'm going to give two answers, and it depends on if I want a city experience or a beach experience. For a city experience, my absolute favorite city in the world is Hong Kong. It's like New York in the tropics. There's just a ton of hustle and bustle. It's just very energizing and exciting, and you can find absolutely everything there, and it's just different enough from here that it's just a fantastic cultural experience in a city environment. And then secondly, if I want a beach, I would highly recommend, I guess this is a rugged beach, Kauai. So I've got an opportunity to go to Kauai, and it's just the most fantastic environment there, tons of outdoor adventure type things to do. The ocean's right there, and it was just beyond beautiful.
Yeah, I'm getting kind of jealous now, sitting here in my New York office now. I need to find some vacation time. But yeah, so one of the other things too, curious about, what is your biggest guilty pleasure?
Guilty pleasure. Oh boy, I think my biggest guilty pleasure is I spend too much money annually on one event, and that is the 4th of July. Every 4th of July, my street, which is a small street, we're only 3 blocks long, takes a school bus and turns it into a 4th of July float. So that is just an opportunity for the whole street to come together in an aggressive 3-week timeline and take a school bus and turn it into a yellow submarine or a TIE fighter or a tank or a diner. So we create something new every year out of the school bus. It's intense. Takes a lot of money and effort, but it is my favorite 3 weeks of the year.
Well, two things I like about it. First of all, that just sounds awesome. But second of all, you're probably the first of like the 15 speakers we've interviewed as part of this series who didn't either say some sort of alcohol or some sort of food for that question. So I applaud the originality there as well. And
great. Try to be unique. I try to be unique.
Definitely. And then, although you did mention that sometimes you turn the bus into a diner, I don't know if that means that there is food being served, so maybe there's a connection, but either way, I think
there might be alcohol in that diner.
Fair enough, yeah.
I'm just going to admit, there might be some that we sneak to the parade.
Now, I know I said that this was going to be the fun, lighter, less businessy section, but I do have one that's about... It is business related, and that is, who is your biggest business role model? And that could be a person, it could be a company you admire, just someone that you feel sets the standard for what you're trying to achieve as a professional.
Yeah, I'm going to go old school here. It's anyone has ever heard of before, but his name's Artie Isaac, and he was my first boss right out of college. Obviously very young in my career. I started in advertising. But the leader of the agency, Artie Isaac, the tagline for the agency was craft messages that change behavior. And I think that actually really set me on my path towards a UX career where we are about changing behavior equally internally in this company, trying to get everyone to think about things from the customer perspective, and also change behavior of our members so that they're really protecting what matters most to them. And Artie was just a very compassionate and wise leader, and was just a great role model for how to be a leader. So I credit a lot of my behavior currently to the way that what I learned from him at my first role.
And now I'm going to ask you to put your role model hat on for a second and share a piece of advice that you feel will be valuable for our listeners as they try to evolve in their careers within customer contact or just professionally overall.
Yeah, I would say, I guess, 2 high-level things. One, if you're in an organization where you're really trying to change mindsets and get people to consider the customer first and walk in the customer's shoes, you better have a lot of energy and patience because it's a long road and it's made with a bunch of little steps. So calibrate your expectations and don't give up. It's a lot of hard work. And then secondly, as a leader for my organization, I try to instill a mindset of servant leadership with my group so that we're all thinking about how can we make things better for the people who are going to come after us.
Well, Heidi, I want to thank you so much. There are just a tremendous amount of insights, a tremendous amount of clear passion and excitement for the potential for the customer contact function, the user experience function, the customer experience function, basically anything engagement oriented to really drive a lot of change for the business, to start thinking about who your customers are, what they want, and how you as an organization can adapt to that. And I can't wait to see not only what you have to share in Nashville, but also how your organization continues to evolve and get better based on these principles. It's going to be great to watch.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person.
Definitely. And for CCW Digital, this has been Brian Cantor.